welcome to another episode of Wonders of the Wade, in which we explore all the wonderful artifacts and documents that are available here at the Wade Center. I'm Dr. David Downing, co-director of the Wade Center here at Wheaton College. I'm here with my other co-director and my co-host, coincidentally, and my cohabitant, Crystal Downing. And Crystal, would you like to introduce today's guest?
Yes. One of the programs that has been instituted at the Wade Center since we've been here is a grant that is awarded to a young scholar. It's called the William George Schuster Grant. And what we are delighted to tell you today is that we have one of the most recent recipients of the Schuster Grant. And this is Sarah Odell. And what the grant does is it enables scholars who are still in school to come and do research at the Wade, and we provide funding that helps with their travel and housing. And Sarah is very impressive. She is now at the University of California at Irvine, which is one of the most prestigious of the UC, University of California campuses, and she is working simultaneously now on a degree in, both a PhD and an MD in medicine, right? Is that how you say it?
Yeah, so the PhD in English literature and then an MD is a...
Okay, so the PhD is in English literature. I mean, this is a really unusual combination, and it's perfect for the type of research that Sarah is doing, in that there is a medical person whose papers we have here at the Wade. And why don't you explain that?
So it's very wondrous that they're here. But Havard was a physician and was one of the Inklings, so there's a clear connection between him and I being, he's a literary physician, he's kind of a intellectual inspiration and kindred spirit. And the Wade has some of his papers here, one in particular being his original draft to what would become the appendix to the problem of pain, which he titled Pain and Behavior in Medical Practice.
Oh. And did it get into the problem of pain?
It did, but looking at the draft, we realized that what he wrote is a lot different than what Lewis eventually did include in his first work of apologetics.
Oh. So was Havard Lewis's doctor as well as a member of the Inklings?
He was. So he first met Lewis in the early 30s when Lewis had the flu. And he shows up, does a house call. Lewis has the flu, and they spend a few minutes talking about the influenza, and they spend much longer talking about ethics and philosophy, and they quickly become very close friends and remain friends until Lewis's death almost 30 years later.
Wow. So he was his doctor, but also would attend the Inklings events then.
Yes. And he's one of the most faithful members after Lewis, his brother, and Tolkien.
Oh, wow. Did he ever write his own fiction or poetry? Did he do creative writing?
He did. I've written a bit about some of his poetry. So he was kind of an unexpected poet, as it were. And so, yes, he wrote poetry, but several I think he did share at Inklings meetings, less so on the creative fiction, but a few pieces. But he was a poet, was a physician. He was a trained scientist, an essayist, and
he wrote prescriptions, I'll bet.
Yes, he did. Case note.
That's right.
And I noticed that here at the Wade, we have some copies, and he hand wrote this epilogue or appendix for Problem of Pain. And the big joke is how doctors, you can't read what they write in their prescriptions. Did you have trouble reading his handwriting?
I have to admit, I'm sure with any of the Wade's authors, some things that they wrote are easier to read than others. This one is blissfully easy to read.
Oh, good.
It's pretty legible.
It's pretty neat handwriting.
Yeah. Generally, as they get older, their handwriting gets more crabbed and crotchety. Tell us about some of his nicknames.
Yes, so Havard was among the Inklings, probably assembled the most nicknames of anybody. He was called Humphrey to the point that I think it was Dyson did not know that his name was Robert. Humphrey. So he shows up in Lewis and Tolkien's letters as Humphrey.
How did he get that nickname?
I'm not even sure. But in Paralandra, the person is Humphrey.
Oh, that's probably
part of it.
Yeah.
So he was Humphrey Havard. Well, Dyson also wasn't Hugo, so everybody had nicknames.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, what's his real name? Victor? I think it was Victor.
I don't know.
Dyson. So other nicknames?
He was also called the Red Admiral because after he served in World War II, he came back and served in the Navy with a big red beard. So the Red Admiral has returned to Oxford, and Lewis wrote a poem commemorating his return. It was, the Admiral stamped on the quarterdeck, and it's this whole kind of backing tale of, his return back to land in Oxford. He was also referred to as the UQ, or the useless quack, which I must heavily emphasize had nothing to do with his medical skill, but happened one day because he had a motor car, which not all the Inklings did. And I think the Lewises were waiting for a ride, and he was late because, as a physician, he was seeing all these patients at and around Oxford at, multiple clinic locations. And Warren goes, "Where's that useless quack?" So that is a reference to his, his taxi services.
And some biographers are taking it seriously. They look for evidence that he wasn't a good physician. But you're right, this is just anecdotal. This is the way they picked up nicknames from each other.
Right. And they're teasing each other. So it's kind of like people who want to turn Jesus's parables into something rather than a metaphor that we can learn from. They want to make it empirically verifiable.
Right. Tell us about I was going to ask about this. Can you pick up what Lewis edited? Was there something about Havard's writing that Lewis wanted to, as they say, put the cookies on a lower shelf, make it more understandable? Can you see a trend into how Lewis edited Havard?
I can. So we look at this and, just flipping through the pages, it's actually almost twice as long as what was published in the Problem of Pain. And Havard notes that Lewis gave him a word count of 1,000 words, and that he goes, I went over, because he wrote 1,100 words, but Lewis actually trimmed it down to less than 600.
Wow.
And looking at it, it's very accessible, it's not very technical, it's even actually more imaginative in the original draft. And unfortunately, what we see is that a lot of what Lewis edited out was this really, humble and compassionate emphasis on mental illness. So there's one passage that Lewis almost completely eliminated, where Havard talks about the tragedy of, the man with severe melancholia, and also a passage about the kind of the spiritual formation benefits of caring for those with mental illness. It induces, he says something like, it induces a deep humility when we realize that reason is a gift which can be lost.
Wow.
And so we don't know exactly why Lewis made these edits. I've of course speculated, but the original draft actually shows a much different side of the medical inkling and a much more nuanced one than we get in the published appendix, which is rather, often than saying remember nothing of their illness and they're fine. But this kind of goes deeper.
Yeah, it's pretty succinct. The appendix doesn't stick in your mind. I wonder, he has this glorious ending, Lewis does, to the Problem of Pain. And it's almost this mystical connection with the infinite God and all his glory. And I wonder if he was afraid that too long of an appendix would detract from the rhetorical power of Lewis's own conclusion.
Well, why not make it an introduction then?
Yeah. Were you able to publish the whole essay in your 7 article?
We did. So we have the essay that I wrote, which actually I come with a similar idea to yours, that Lewis ends with this kind of beatific vision. And then Havard kind of, would be a little bit of a downer, reflecting on the realities of this, and Lewis wants a nice bow. But yes, so published the article as well as a version of Pain and Behavior in Medical Practice, where we show all the edits and what was changed and what was different than what was published. So it's in there as well.
And you should explain what 7 is.
7 is the Wade Center's annual academic journal, and we publish articles from well-established authors as well as promising young authors. And so we're happy to cover all 7 of our authors, not just Lewis, but
Right.
Tolkien,
And
Martin.
Lewis's friend,
right,
Havard,
right.
who knew
Inklings,
several
right.
of the 7 authors. And what is your project that you're working on now?
Yes, so I'm currently working on a book on Robert E. Havard, partially titled The Medical Inkling. And so this will be the first full-length study of Havard, and I'll go through his different identities as an Inkling, as a Catholic writer, and as a physician. And so each of these kind of explore kind of a duality in those identities. So for example, him as a physician, he was a trained physician scientist, but he also did a lot of work in psychological medicine. So kind of body and soul, faith and reason, you know, imagination and reason, all those kinds of...
So you can use some of the things that you discovered
Yes.
in this unpublished manuscript that now you've published, thanks to 7, which we produce here at the Wade, with our wonderful managing editor, Marjorie Mead. So is this also your dissertation, or is it in addition to your dissertation?
So first, I do want to comment on what you said, that the Wade has been absolutely integral to this research. The archives are these magical, wondrous things. And they truly are, and it's a true honor and a blessing and an excitement just to be here and to be able to go through often forgotten pages and kind of reinvigorate these authors, which we also love. But to answer your question, yes, this is in addition to my dissertation.
Wow.
So I'm writing a dissertation on the 18th century Gothic as well. So there are very much common threads. The imagination looms large in both projects, but it is a extra joy.
Well, congratulations on your graduate work, so distinguished, on the Schuster Award, and
On the 7 article.
The 7 article. So we're very pleased to be supporting your work when you're able to come to the Wade and do research.
Well, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.